Okay. Gentlemen, I'm going to start the learning sponsors, and then we'll go right into the shiur. Okay, here, learning Sarah Alpert in memory of her husband. I'm going to do the shortened version. Bella and David Adler in memory of her father. Friends of Honey Heifetz, friends of Jack Prince, friends of Sandy Davidoff, friends of Judy Cohen, friends of Dr. Annette Safransky, Gail and Leslie Kaplan in memory of their parents. Friends of Linda Katz, Lee and Harvey Greenberg in memory of their parents. Friends of Rochelle Ebner, Ike and Evelyn Blachler in memory of his sister, Dr. Phyllis Pacheco. Steve and Eileen Greenberg in memory of his father. A month of learning, Karen and Mel Halla in memory of her mother, Tova and Leo Uri Zimmer. In memory of her mother and father, Judith and Michael Poretsky. In memory of her father, Perry and Jill Meltzer. In memory of his sister and his mother. Bee Kaiser in memory of her husband, Ida Grobird, in memory of his father, Stephanie Gold and Fred Mortman in memory of Jacqueline Santis Lapere, Sister Bruce Deutsch, students of Rabbi Yisrael Leib Ed Kurtzer, Week of Learning by Carol and Josh Sanborn in memory of her father. And today, there are no individual days of learning for today. And Hashemas have an aliyah, crank, Rafia, Velti, Shir, Shema, Talia, Chol, Ben Israel, good, Kaben, Shtiar. Okay. All right, we'll get underway momentarily. Okay. Just a reminder that, again, the schedule, as Rabbi Yasker pointed out, besides the two shiurim today, we have Rabbi Hanoch Teller at 4 o'clock for those who had registered. Okay? That's what it said on the flyer. I don't make the rules. I just don't announce them. Same way I tell you I didn't edit the Gemara. Sometime we'll try to, if we have a chance, someday we'll talk about the editing of the Gemara, actually. It's a very... Oh, but then you got going to the a little bit of history. Sorry. Okay. Well, then you got Tanayim or Moraim, but then afterwards you have other groups too, right? The Svaraim and the Gaonim, exactly. Right. Okay, I want us to understand that, remember, started off this perek. We went through a long list of individuals who, because of certain behaviors, transgressions, would get the punishment of skila. Okay, we're now still really continuing with that example. I see a few guys are okay, still wandering in. Okay, coming in, and so basically we want to continue. We're on Samach Hay, which is going to start a new Mishnah. Okay, and give us an example of other categories of individuals who would be punished by skila. Okay, what I just want, again, a word or two more of introduction. You remember that we've often come across the issue in the Gemara as to whether or not it's a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and the other Chachamim as to whether an act requires, whether, let me rephrase it, whether a physical act is required in order to indicate that the person has committed the transgression to be punished by skila. Okay? And the Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion that a physical act was not necessarily the case required, whereas most of the Chachamim said it was required. Okay? Well, that's the question. Okay, that's the question. Is it have to be, if it's belibo, is that considered machshava? And is that considered an act? Okay? And so the end result, as we're going to see, is they're always comparing it to the megadef, the blasphemy, because that was simply a matter of verbal, okay, statement. And then the Gemara always wanted to say, well, is that enough of an act? Okay? In other words, if there was no, when we had other examples, there was a clear physical behavior, that's one thing. But can we say that a verbal statement like the Megadef, okay, is considered a major enough physical act to be considered, therefore, an act worthy of being punished with skila? Okay? I only bring this back up because the examples that we're going to have in today's Mishnah are such that they keep coming back to that issue, because if you say somebody, let's say, does sorcery, or somebody makes a vow, okay, well, that's our parallels. One was sorcery. That would clearly be similar to the original Mishnah, okay, because maybe he's reciting some sort of magical incantation. Is that only words, or is that a real act? And the parallel to that we saw with idol worship was the question of somebody making a vow, okay, or fulfilling a vow with the name of the deity, of the idol, okay? Is that, again, only a verbal element, or is there something more substantive to that? Okay? So I'm trying to just put things in perspective as we start the new Mishnah, okay? And as I said, we're on Samachay Amud Aleph. Matnitin, our Mishnah teaches as follows. Baal Ov. How are we going to define Baal Ov? I'm going to define it as a necromancer. Okay? We're going to discuss that as we go through the Gemara. Okay? So the Gemara in the Mishnah tells us, Zeh pitom hamidaber mishachayav. Okay? It is an individual who speaks through his armpit. Okay? Gemara is going to clarify. Look at art scroll number 4. Make a note there if that's what you're using. Okay? V'yidoni, and another kind of individual. We're going to call the Yidoni a sorcerer. Okay? Art scroll, I would have liked to have seen art scroll give a stronger translation, both to Baal Ov and to Yidoni. I have to use, in this case, the Koran translation for Yidoni as the sorcerer. Okay, whereas the Baal Ov is clearly a necromancer. Necromancer is one who brings up the spirit of a deceased and then has that person talking. Okay, think of a what do we call it? One of those gypsies that do a what? No, we said that already. Okay, all right, but we often find that that's the idea. Okay. Or the other image I want you to call to mind is from the famous play Hamlet, where he's talking to the skull. Okay? Yeah? Okay. Seances, all those, right, example. That's a good example. Thank you. Well, of course. So that's it. Okay, so those are our points. We're talking now, remember there's a pasuk that clearly spells out, okay, regarding the Baal Ov and the Yidoni. So we've defined them. What is the difference between a Baal Ov who speaks from his a joint in his body, his armpit, or the Yidoni, the sorcerer? Zeh hamidaber befiv. Okay, one who actually has the voice of the deceased coming out of his own mouth. Okay, Hare elu beskila. They are both. Okay, even though the Mishnah is defining some difference between them, they are both punishable by skila. V'hanishal behem ba'azhara. And the one who makes an inquiry of them actually is over on a love. Okay, right. So we're going to come through now with the Gemara. It's going to try to clarify further the distinction made in the Mishnah and other aspects of whether this is what necromancy, what sorcery, things like that. And would be Malchus, exactly. Oh, being over in a love. Okay? My shnahacha. What's the difference here? The katani bal over yadoni, because our pasuk clearly taught both were going to be are prohibited. All right? What? And punishable by skila. Right? Umay shna gabe kritus. And what is the difference in the fact that we have a Gemara in Kritus that basically refers to the same thing, but it does not include both of them in that Gemara in Kritus. So the Gemara is going to have to say, first of all, how come, okay, if you've got one Gemara that refers to both of them, and one Gemara that only refers to one, and our pasuk referred to both of them, we've got a problem here. Okay, so that's what the Gemara is going to address initially. Okay, right? The Katani Baal Ov. Okay, that it taught, the Gemara in Krisus taught reference to the Baal Ov, right? Vishaire, and it omitted Leyadoni. Okay, and that. Okay. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, says Rabbi Yochanan, trying to give an explanation of the difference between the two Gemaras. Rabbi Yochanan Omer Ho'il Ushnehen Belav Echad Ne'amru. His answer is no. There was only one lav in the pasuk that included the both of them, and therefore that's the main difference. One Tana took it because of that to refer both of them. One Tana just referred to one, assuming that you would know that the other one is included there as well. Okay? Reish Lakish disagrees. Amar Reish Lakish Amar Yidoni Lafisha Ein Bo Ma'aseh. Okay, that according to Reish Lakish, there is no actual act by the Yidoni. Okay, it's only again something speaking. All right, in other words, and therefore it's really a situation of shogeg, and there is no sin offering, no chatas required for him. Okay, well, let's see. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. My shna ba'al ov dinakat. So why then the Gemara increases only focus on the Baal ov? Okay, in that situation. Okay, and it was left out in the Mishnah. Okay, the Yidoni was left out in the Mishnah in Krisus. Again, Mishum de Patach Beikra. Why? Because if we look at it, his answer is because that's what the pasuk referred to initially. Okay, V'Reish Lakish and Reish Lakish. Ma'itama amar k'Rabbi Yochanan. What was the reason that he did not give a similar answer to Rabbi Yochanan? Amar Rav Papa, it says, Chalukin hein b'mita. Okay, his answer is as follows. The same way you could say that in a shogeg situation, one would be required to bring a chatas and the other would not. Therefore, there's a distinction between them. Likewise, in regards to a death penalty, there's somewhat a separation in them as well. Okay, that's his rationale. V'Rabbi Yochanan, chalukah delav shma chalukah. But that distinction, Rabbi Yochanan argues against Rav Papa's suggestion, is not a true distinction between them. Okay, demita lo shma chalukah, because the fact that the Torah gives the same exact death penalty that it's skila. Okay, there's no real distinction between them. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara flips back and asks, as far as Rabbi Yochanan goes, my tamalo amar karesh lakish. What was the reason that he did not give the same kind of answer as did Reish Lakish? Amar lach, he would say to you, matnitin dekritut, our Mishnah that we said only referred to the Baal Ov and not to the Yidoni in Kritutz. Rabbi Akiva he. It's the view of Rabbi Akiva, because remember, Rabbi Akiva had a particular view that you did not need ma'aseh in order to require a death penalty, and that speaking would even be enough. Okay? The Amar, who says, Rabbi Akiva, lo ba'inin ma'aseh, that we don't need a substantive physical act. Okay? V'reish Lakish, and as far as Reish Lakish goes, Nihi, the lo by Rabbi Akiva ma'aseh rabbah. It may be, says the Gemara, that Reish Lakish holds similar to Rabbi Akiva insofar as the fact that we don't need a major substantive act. Okay? However, says Reish Lakish, ma'aseh zuta ba'i, but even a minor substantive act, okay, such as speaking, okay, would be considered an act. By the way, those using Art Scroll, make a note by number 19, okay? Goes into more detail. So what do we compare it to? This issue of somebody who says something and as a result gets the skila penalty. We're going to compare it to what we've been doing before, to Megadef, the blasphemer. Okay? So what happens? Megadef, my ma'aseh ika. So if that's the case, what kind of substantive act do we have when the person blasphemes? Okay? In other words, verbally says something, curses. We said that was based, we saw, on using the divine name to curse the divine being, is what we explained it, right? Akimat tzfatav, the curving of his lips, okay? Have ma'aseh, okay? When he's saying something, he's moving his lips, and therefore that is a act, okay? Bal'ov, and therefore the romancer, okay? What about that example? Okay. Hold on a quick second. Okay. As we get back onto Zoom. Okay. Okay. Well, we can always think of a ventriloquist, okay, who supposedly doesn't move his lips, yet a sound comes out. So maybe I'm going to argue that the fact that there's a sound coming out, okay, maybe that's enough of an act, right? Okay, especially if we hold like Reish Lakish, suggesting that that's really Rabbi Akiva's view. All right? All right, so the curving of the lips, Havima said, that's a deed. So if that's the case, asks the Gemara, Baal Ov, my Maseika. There's your question, Bob. Right? Baruch Shekivanta. If he's simply saying, if a different voice is coming out of his own mouth, is that really a actual Maaseh? Okay? That's, no, says the Gemara, Hakashat Zrootav Have Maaseh. No, maybe we're going to say that in the Baal Ov, the fact that he's clapping his arms, okay, moving his, lifting up his armpit, and the voice coming out of his armpit. Note, by the way, Art Scroll note number 23. Okay, make a note there. Okay, Have Maaseh. That would be an actual substantive. Va'afilu Rabbanan, even according to the rabbis, asks the Gemara, Vahatanya. But haven't we been taught elsewhere in a Braita? Eino chayav ela al davar sheyesh bo ma'aseh. Okay, that the one is not liable except in a situation where there is a real deed. Kigon, like in the following examples that we had with regards to idol worship. All right, zivuach, slaughtering, kitur, the burning, nisuch, pouring a libation, v'hishtachava'ah, and actual bowing. V'amar Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish would now say to us, Man tana hishtachava'ah. Again, so who was it that taught that bowing was an adequate kind of real deed, a real act? Rabbi Akiva, it was Rabbi Akiva. The Amar lo ba'inin ma'aseh, who says we don't really need a substantive act. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan, and as far as Rabbi Yochanan goes, Amar afilu tema rabbanan. No, you might even say that that's true according to the rabbis. Why? Kefifat kumato. Sorry, because bowing involves bending over one's body, either when you're bowing down or when you're straightening yourself back up. Okay, the Rabbanan have a ma'aseh, and for the rabbis, that is an actual substantive act. Okay, Hashta, now, says the Gemara, the Reish Lakish, according to Reish Lakish, if we're saying Fifat Kumato, the Rabbanan, lo havi ma'aseh, might we say that he doesn't feel that bending the body is an actual substantive act? Hakashat rotav the ba'ov have ma'aseh, that the clapping of one's arms is by the ba'ov is a real substantive act. Okay, ki ka'amar Reish Lakish. For when Reish Lakish says that, nami la Rabbi Akiva. This is also according to the view of Rabbi Akiva. Aval Rabbanan lo. But for the rabbis, no, it's not according to them enough of an act. Ihachi, if that's the case, yatsa, then we should exclude, right, Megadef, the blasphemer, Ubal Ov, and the Baal Ov, Mibayele. Then why then would we include it be saying that they are then going to be found guilty, liable, and punishable by Skila? El Amar Ula. But rather, Ula is going to give us another example. Okay? Now, his statement is going to be more particularly focused on the Mishnah in Krisus, where we said it only said Baal Ov and not Yedoni. But Makater Lashed. Okay, if you're making an example of an act, okay, that has substance, what about one who burns a offering to a demon? Okay? Amar le Rava, and Rava responds. In other words, maybe that's the reason that we have a difference between the two Mishnayot. Okay? That with Yidoni, there is a clear act. Okay? Okay? In that situation. Okay? Amar le Rava, says Rava, Mikater le shade Oved avodat kochavimhu, but one who would burn a something, an offering, let's say, to a demon, transgresses idol worship. Ela amar Rava, and so therefore Rava, however, comes to try to give a different perspective. But mikater lechaver, okay, what is he doing? He burns something for the purpose of conjuring up demons. Okay, so it's not an actual worship of the demon, but it is a magical, all right? The old joke about the witches gathered around the cauldron, oil, boy, whatever, toil and trouble, right? Charming, right? That's it. They're trying to bring it. Okay, Amarle, he said to him, Abai, hamikater lechaver, says Abai in response to Rava. Okay, conjuring demons, chover chaverhu. That is an actual act of sorcery and involved with demonology, and as a result, that person should be considered guilty. And yes, says the Gemara, V'haTorah amra, and the Torah clearly states, chover ze b'skila, that one involved in conjuring demons is punished by stoning. Tanu Rabbanan, says another brighter. Chover chaver, okay, echad chaver gadol, v'echad chaver katan. One who is involved in conjuring, whether it's conjuring on a larger scale or conjuring on a lesser scale. Va'afilu nechashim va'akravim. And even if they're trying to conjure up demons that are like snakes were scorpions. Okay, Amar Abai, and okay, therefore says Abai, Hilkach Haiman Ditzamid Zibur Akrava, and therefore, if you have an individual who, in through conjuring, creates some sort of a creature, okay, that is a combination of a bee and a scorpion, Afalgav dekamechavein delo lisko, even though their intent is not to cause harm, asur, it is forbidden. Going on, Rabbi Yochanan, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, okay, Ma'ishna the kafifat komato l'Rabbanan. What is the difference in regards to bending one's body according to the rabbis? Have maaseh, that it is considered a substantive act. Va'akimat tzfatav, and basically the curving of the lips. Lo have maaseh, then that wouldn't be considered a substantive act. Amar Rava, says Rava, shani megadef. No, if we're going to compare it back to the blasphemer, that individual is a different case. O'il v'yeshno balev. Okay? Why? Because he has clear intent in his heart. In other words, machshava, and clear mindset to do so. Okay? So what happens as we go over to the new Okay, that would seem to be the case. Okay, okay, machshava kamasa. All right, if there's clear intent, that's the case. Now, what happens? Yes. Okay, no, that's the Art Scrolls translation. I know. Okay, I think I would just respond as we go through. We'll see. There's some. In other words, is there a difference between, let's say, sorcery, witchcraft, versus idol worship? Okay, it doesn't mean that one is permitted and one is not. They're both forbidden. It may very well be that your death penalty would be different for one versus the other. Okay, right, still a death penalty, but okay. Okay, let's go on. Maitiv Rav Zera. Rav Zera, sorry, Yatsu Edim Zomamim. Wait a second. If we're talking about individuals whose having spoken something, okay, may be problematic, do we consider that in other words, if they're giving false testimony, are we going to say that's parallel to either the Megadef or to somebody else doing something verbally? Is that enough of a substantive act that they should likewise get the death penalty? But after all, we have a pasuk in the Torah that tells us what is the penalty for death for Edim Zomamim. They get the penalty that was given, okay, kasher zamam la'asot, okay, which means that if it's a death penalty case, they would be eligible to get the death penalty. So here Rabbi Zera is really saying Yatsu Edim Zomamim from a chatas, from a sin offering, right? She'ein bohem ma'aseh, he argues, because they don't have, okay, a substantive act, because it's only something that comes from their mouth. Va'amai, and why is that the case? Ha'lit naho belev. Okay, isn't it something here that they're carrying out with intent? Okay, their heart. Amar Rava, Shani Edim Zomamim, that Edim Zomamim, that situation is different. Why? Ho'il v'yeshno bakol. Why? Because there is ideally some, I'm going to use the word publicity here, some awareness, okay, in terms of what they're saying. Right. It's public. Right? That's the point. Okay, v'yesh no bakol. V'kol l'Rabbi Yochanan lav ma'asehu. If that's the case, are we going to say some public awareness of what they say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is not considered a substantive act? Vaha itma, but don't we have elsewhere where it says chasama bekol vehinhiga bekol? Okay, that if we have a text that tells us that if you're going to muzzle an animal, okay, when it's uh, pulling the plow, let's say, vehinhiga be animal, or you have two different species of animals, okay, and you're leading them. Okay, again, what happens? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayav. That in those situations, Rabbi Yochanan says the person is liable. Okay, so that would disagree with what we thought was the situation of Rabbi Yochanan, whether it's a maaseh or not. V'Reish Lakish Amar Patur. But Reish Lakish says the person is exempt. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayab. When Rabbi Yochanan says he is liable there, what happens? Akimat piv have maaseh. Because again, he believes that moving the lips, okay, is an actual substantive act. Reish Lakish Amar Patur. Reish Lakish says he's exempt. Why? Akimat piv lo have maaseh. Because he doesn't believe that moving the lips is a substantive act. Ela Amar Rava, but rather Rava is telling us Shani Edim Zomamim, that the situation with Edim Zomamim is different. Ho'il v'yeshnam b'ri'iyah. Why? Because there is another aspect. When they give testimony, it's based on visual something, okay, that they saw visually the incident. That's the point. So there is a ma'aseh regarding the Zaydim Zomamim. Okay? We go now to seeing is an action. Seeing is an action, and therefore that's unique to the fact that therefore they could be culpable of a death penalty. Okay? Okay. Tanu Rabbanan says a new bright. Listen. Baal Ov. Okay, here again, trying to define a little bit more. Okay, the Baal Ov, the necromancer, Zeh HaMedaber Bein HaPrakim. It is the person who is talking by means of through his joints, his armpits. Okay, Umevin Atzile Yadav. And he basically is moving body parts. Yedoni, regarding the Yedoni, we said the sorcerer, Zehamaniach etzem yadua befiv. What he's doing is he's actually, that's why I gave the example like a ventriloquist. Okay, he puts a bone of a certain animal in his mouth. Okay, befiv vehu medaber me'alav. And he uses that as if he's speaking the voice of the deceased. Okay, me'tive. But we'll challenge this with the following. V'haya ke'ov me'eretz kolecha. Okay, and it was like a necromancer whose voice comes up from the ground. My love, don't we hear, what are we saying here? The mishtai ki orche. Okay, in that case, it's like it's speaking naturally. Okay, that's the problem. Lo, no, says the Gemara. Desalik viativ bein habrakim umishtai. No, when we're talking about that individual, we're saying that that the voice is actually coming from a body part. Okay, in this case, his armpits. And that's how it's heard. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like speaking naturally. Okay? Ha, tashma, says the Gemara. But listen to the following example, which I'm going to challenge again. We have the case here. Remember when Shaul went to see the witch, okay, and she brought the voice, okay, of Shmuel. Okay, Vatomer Ha'isha El Shaul. She said, the woman said to Shaul, Elohim Ra'iti Olim Min Haaretz. Again, that I saw some sort of spirit coming out from the earth. Okay, what happens? My love the mishtai ki orche. Isn't that an example, okay, of more like speaking naturally? Asks the Gemara. Lo, no, says the Gemara. The yativ bein haprakim u'mishtayeh. No, because again, we're saying the Baal Ov has the voice come from but among his joints, from his armpits. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we get into another example of the fact when we say that the voice could come from a body part. Okay, and this gets a little surprising. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Baal Ov. Okay, that's the one who the voice is going to come from a body part. Echad hama'aleh b'zichuro. The same applies where he brings out, I'm going to say, the voice through his male organ. V'echad hanish'al b'golgolet. Or the same that he has holding a skull, and he has the voice come from the skull. Okay? Ma bein lezeh lezeh. What's the difference between these two examples? Ma'aleh b'zuchuro, with regards to the one who has the voice comes out through his male organ. Eino ole kedarko ve'eino ole b'shabbat. Okay, in other words, in that particular case, the voice is not going to come out in a natural way, and it's not going to come out on Shabbat. Or the art scroll suggests what happens is the image of the deceased is going to come feet first and not head first. Okay. Right? What happens? Nish'al begugolet, but where the individual is holding a skull and has the voice come from the skull, ole kedarko v'ole b'shabbat. In that case, the sound of the voice is going to be more natural, okay? And they could bring that voice that on Shabbos, exactly. All right? V'olesh b'shabbat. Ole, asks the Gemara, it comes out in that situations. Lehecha salik. Okay? Where is it going? Ha kame manat. Okay? What do we say that it's there before him? Okay? Ela ema. But I might say regarding the skull as follows: One kedarko v'one b'shabbat. No, not that it comes up on naturally and on Shabbat, but the voice answers in a more natural tone, and it will answer on Shabbat. Okay? Va'af she'ela zo sha'al. In similar fashion, we find the following story. Okay, remember we've always said the story comes to substantiate the piece in the Gemara. Okay. Okay, with the famous story, okay, of Turnus Rufus. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. He was the Roman governor. Exactly. We're going to see that. Who often had debates, as we're going to see here. So what happens? So likewise, the question that was asked by Turnus Rufus to Rabbi Akiva. What was it? Amarlo. So he says to Rabbi Akiva, Uma yom miyomayim. Okay, basically he's going to ask him, Amarlo, Uma gavar migvorayim. Okay, what is so unique about the Shabbos day that you couldn't observe it any other day? Okay, so Akiba answers him, what is so unique about you as a man that any other man could have been in your position? Amarle. So Turnus Rufus answers him, Dimare Savi, that my master, namely the Caesar, commanded me to be the governor. So Akiva answers the following: Shabbos nami demare tzave. Our master also commanded us to have this special day, the Shabbos.
Is this an answer to why the spirit doesn't come up on Shabbos?
It could be. It
Or it
could
just
be.
comes out of nowhere?
It could very well be that as we see the rest of the story, it will clarify which is which. Okay. Amarle, Turnus Rufus, Hachi Ka'aminalach. This is what I really meant to ask you. Mi Yamar Daha Idna Shabta. Who is it that says that today is the Sabbath day? Okay, and therefore there are certain, right, parameters of behavior. Okay, Amarlo. So Akiba gives him one first answer. Nahar Sabaton Yochiach. Okay, that we have a certain river that during the week it flows very heavily. Okay, but on Shabbos it flows smoothly. Okay, that might be proof. Okay, furthermore, here's your connection now. Baal Ov Yochiach. The example of the necromancer gives further proof as to the uniqueness of Shabbat that day. Kavru, okay? Right. So in other words, if it's said that the Baal Chov, that whatever he uses, sometimes it can't come up, it can't speak out on Shabbos, that says Shabbos is a unique day. So what happens? Okay, and then Akiva gives a further answer to Turnus Rufus. Kivro shel aviv yochiach she'ein ma'ale ashan b'Shabbat. And the I'm going to say the burial site of Turnus Rufus's father also is going to be proof, okay, that Shabbat is a special day because there is no smoke coming out from the grave on Shabbos. The implication there is such that where did Turnus Rufus's father go? To Hades. Okay, that's the point. So in other words, Turnus Rufus is going to not be happy with that answer, and he basically responds, okay, Amarlo. Turnus Rufus says, Bizito, you disgraced him. Baishto, you embarrassed him. Kilalto, you insulted him. Okay? All right. Why? Because he basically said, to the governor, your father is an SOB. Okay. And therefore he went to hell. Okay. That's the point. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's go on. All right. A little gutsy there in the part of Akiva. Give him a.
Get killed.
That's it. Okay, Shoel, all right? So, all right, so Shoel Ov. Okay, so remember our Mishnah. Okay, our Mishnah said on the top of the previous Amud that the one who inquires is over on a love. Okay? All right, so what happens? Shoel Ov, Hainu, this is what we mean. V'doresh al hametim. Does this mean that they inquire of the deceased? In other words, they go for whether it's a seance or some else. Right? Doresh limetim. It says no, they desire they actually inquire directly to the deceased. Kidatanya, as taught elsewhere in a Braita, the pasuk, v'doresh el hametim, that one inquires going to the deceased. Zeh hamariv atzmo. It's what we mean by that is normally a person who starves himself. V'holech v'lan b'beit akvarot. They go and they lay down on a kever, on a burial site. Okay. Kadesha tishre alav ruach tum'ah. In other words, so that they acquire a sense of ritual impurity. Ukashahaya Rabbi Akiva magia lemikra zeh. And when Rabbi Akiva would arrive and read this pasuk, okay, haya boche, he would cry. Why? Uma hamariv, whereas the one who starves himself, hamariv atzmo, kadesh tishra alav ruach tum'ah, in order to gain a feeling, a spirit of uncleanliness. Shore alav ruach tum'ah, on that person comes this status of impurity. Hamariv atzmo kadesh tishre alav ruach tahara, one who starves himself in order to obtain a spirit of sanctity, of holiness, of tahara, of purification, alachat kama v'kama. How much more so should that person, in a sense, be rewarded? Okay? Okay, and that happens, says the Gemara. Aval ma'aseh, but what can I do? She'avanotenu garmu lanu, that it's our sins that caused us not able to gain that level of tahara. Okay, shene'amar, as it says, ki im avanotechem hayu mavdilim benechem levein Elohechem, that it is our sins that made a separation between us and our God. Note Art Scroll number 40 goes into some detail on that topic. Okay, as we get to the next story, okay, I want us to think of the famous example, medieval example of the creation of the golem. Okay, all right, now, why do I suggest that? Because there's such a thing known as Sefer HaYetzirah, okay, which is a mystical book, okay, by which one could use conjuring, in a sense, okay, and actually create a being. Okay, theoretically, Shelley, I forget the name of the author, who wrote Frankenstein, okay, used the model, the story, the legend of the golem. What? Mary Shelley used that supposedly as a basis, according to some, to the Frankenstein story. Okay, so a little literature there. All right, so he says Amar Rava. Okay, says Rava, right? Mary Shelley, thank you. Okay, says Rava, Iba'u tzadikim, if a righteous person or many righteous people chose to do so or wanted to do so, Baru Alma, they could create a creation, a kind of being. Okay? Shneamar, as it says, Ki avonotechem hayu mavdilin v'gomer, that it was our sins that separated us. Okay? Varava bara gavra, and Rava created a being, some kind of entity. And what did he do? Kind of golem. Shadra lekame de Rabbi Zera, and he sent it before Rabbi Zera. Hava kamishtai bahade. Okay, what happened is Rabbi Zera spoke to it. Velo hava kamahadale, but it didn't answer him. Amarle, okay, man havre, okay, he said to them basically, okay, that it seems that you were created by one of my colleagues, okay, at hadar afrach. By saying so, he destroyed the golem and returned back to dust, back to earth. Okay, Rav Chanina v'Rav Oshaya, a further story. These two colleagues, Rabbi Chanina and Rav Oshaya, Havu Yatve Kol Ma'ale Shavta, they would sit together Erev Shabbos, Va'aske B'Sefer Yetzirah, and they would indulge themselves in using incantations from the book of Sefer Yetzirah. And what did they do? Umivru laho igla tilta, and they created for themselves a calf, a third year of maturity. In other words, a mature enough animal which could be slaughtered and to be eaten. Okay, va'achlele, and they would eat it. Okay, tanu rabbanan. Okay, This was fast food, so to speak. All right. What happens is a Braita. Okay. Again, we have another pasuk that brings us another kind of individual that is prohibited. Okay. Me'onan. I'm going to translate that as a soothsayer. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Okay. Ze ma'avir. Okay. Shiv'a minei zachur al ha'ayin. This is one who uses 7 kinds of seed, okay, from either his own or animals, and passes it before his eyes. In other words, he does some sort of magical incantation, okay? V'chachamim omrim, ze ha'ochez et ha'enayim. Okay, one who deceives the eyes, in other words, who can create illusions, okay? Rabbi Akiva Omer, ze ha'mechashev itim v'sha'ot. The soothsayer is one who determines things based on the seasons and the hours. In other words, that he's going to say, this is such an hour is good for this. Such an hour is bad for that. Okay? And that's what we're going to see. The Gemara, V'omer hayom yafeh, let's say, today is a good day to go out on a journey. L'machar yafeh likach. Tomorrow is a good day to purchase something. Lemudei arvei shaviut chutin yafot. And we learned that the eve of a sabbatical year is good for produce. Okay? Ikurei kniot mihiot raot. But uprooting the certain produce, okay, is bad for it. In other words, cut it instead of just pulling it up, uprooting it. Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, we have another example. Menachesh. I'm going to translate that as an enchanter or an augur or a diviner. Again, we have different answers. Zeh omer pito nafla mipiv. This one says his bread fell out of his mouth, or makalo nafla miyado, or his staff fell from his hand. Bano karolo me'acharav, or his son called him to come back from leaving on a trip. Orev korelo, okay, or a raven called him. Tzvi hifsiko baderech, or he's walking on the path and a deer crosses his path. Nachash b'mimino, or there's a snake. He sees a snake along the road, okay? Vishu'al mismolo, or there's a fox that's on his side. We're just going to go over a little bit to the top on Samech Vav. Okay, what is it? Al tadchil bi shachritu. Okay, don't start off in the morning. Okay, Rosh Chodesh hu, or if there's a new moon coming. Okay, Motzei Shabbat hu, or it's the end of the week and it's the start of the new week. In other words, using these time elements, what happens? Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita, v'lo tenachashu, v'lo te'onenu. Okay, one should not be a augur, not be a soothsayer. Kegon elu haminachashim, like those who practice in sorcery, enchantment, bechulda, ubaofot, ubedagim, whether they use weasels, whether they use birds, whether they use fish. And by the way, we know that the Romans used the entrails of certain animals as a means of presenting magical divination. Okay, so we'll stop right there on Samech Vav at the mission. Okay, everybody have a good day.
I can explain a lot of people have they won't, like when they move into a new house, they'll do it on Tuesday. They demand the different until
You don't think that there was some superstitions that came into Jewish practice in Eastern Europe? Okay. Well, I don't know if there's an exact parallel there, but yeah.
I'm vegetarian.
Right. Well, there's an issue. There's an issue